The other day in my Discord, this video was suggested to me by Simp CEO, knowing that I am a Cyno main and wanted to know what my reaction to this video would be. Vars 2 created a video about why no one plays Cyno. Now, I love Cyno, and I can only imagine what points are going to be made in this video. So I'm going to react to this video and see if I agree or disagree with some of the points that Vars makes. And I'm going to throw my own input. As a Cyno lover, I love Cyno, and a Cyno main, I can maybe clear up some points as well. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let's watch why no one plays Cyno.
When Dendro was announced at the tail end of version 2, players were eagerly excited for the new reactions. I myself made a video over 2 years ago theorizing how Dendro could serve as a great equalizer for Genshin, which at the time was very lopsided. Between the two quote-unquote DPS elements, Pyro and Electro, it was abundantly clear which one held all the cards. But since Dendro was closely associated with Electro, all eyes were on the lightning element and how things would change for it. Not too long after version 3, Cyno's banner was announced, and players were excited, very excited for him. He would be the first true dedicated.
Okay, so we have tried Cyno Overload Team, which was a lot of fun to use. It did enough damage, but we all know that Cyno and Dendro is the way to go if you want big damage.
Dedicated Electro carry to come out since, well, Kotsing Shogun, although Shogun's more of a sub-DPS in Hyper Bloom teams, so I'd be hard-pressed to say she's a dedicated carry. With interest in Electro being renewed and tons of speculation on how strong Dendro would be, it was the perfect opportunity for Hoyo to release a new Electro carry, someone who can demonstrate the full extent of what the new Aggravate and Hyper Bloom reactions could do. But let me tell you, if there's anyone with luck as awful as Bennett's, it might have to be this guy. Discussion on Cyno across all platforms has always taken a pessimistic tone, and with Clorant having been released a couple versions ago, it's only further deteriorated the unfortunate circumstances of his character. I've actually wanted to make a piece on this guy for months now, so today's episode of Why No One Plays will be featuring the General Mahamatra himself, Sayu. Pardon me, I mean Cyno will be featuring Cyno.
Nice.
Character popularity has just as much to do with timing and circumstance as it does with strength and practical value. It's just like an anime, video game, movie, or book. It doesn't matter how good the story or game gets towards the end if players get bored or fed up and drop it. As they say, first impressions are lasting impressions, and there's no greater victim of that than Cyno. The entire stage was set for him to make a grand
my first impressions of Cyno was like, oh man, he is awesome.
Expectations right from the start. Even early on, the merits promoted by Dendro were noticeable, as evident by the likes of Kotsing going from a subpar mediocre pick to a meta-relevant choice for a time. Her rapid and continuous onslaught of Electro application gave her outstanding performance in Aggravate when used in tandem with Fischl. And with Cyno having a playstyle visually resembling Razor's relentless attacks, everyone was under the impression he would be even better than Kotsing. After all, you're comparing a day 1 standard banner 5-star unit to a feature version 3 5-star whose toolkit was no doubt conceptualized with the knowledge of Dendro being added to the game. Superficially, that appeared to be the case. The focus of his gameplay is his ultimate, a steroid-type ultimate not unlike what you see on Ito, Noel, Razor, Shell, and such, during which he would gain Electro Infusion, bonus elemental mastery, immunity to Electro Charge, and a bit of stagger resistance. Additionally, his attack animation would change, discarding his polearm for a brief moment and literally ripping it to shreds with his bare claws. If people thought Dia was the first to throw hands with her ultimate, technically it was actually Cyno. His rushdown-oriented attack animation
Cyno's ult is awesome,
further pushing the notion that he would be able to weaponize Dendro to the fullest extent possible. All he needed was some equipment, a proper team, some practice, and maybe a bit of spreadsheet slaving, and he would be set to take over the meta. So what was his issue? It all begins with his playstyle. Cyno's elemental burst has a base duration of 10 seconds and a cooldown of 20, but when casting a skill during this time, he adds an extra 4 seconds of buff duration to his empowered state, and with the skill cooldown being 7.5 seconds, you can extend it to its maximum duration of 18 seconds, giving him an impressive 90% uptime, noticeably higher than most on-fielders back then. Considering both Hyper Bloom and Aggravate can be maintained for that amount of time, it feels like a match made in heaven. Just get your setup and let Cyno sweep through everyone in the game. The problem is, in exchange for having arguably the highest on-field endurance of any character in the game, Cyno trades flexibility. I don't think I need to explain why 18 seconds is a very long time, excessively so. While this may appear to be an advantage, initially it was a massive detriment for him. At the time he came out, there was hardly anyone who could support him for that amount of time. Most conventional rotations are anywhere between 8 to 12 seconds because that's what the majority of the roster is able to sustain. Bennett's uptime is 12 seconds, but when you account for having to set up the rest of the team before switching to your carry, it's applicably 8 to 10 seconds give or take. Xingqiu same thing, buff duration of 15, but if you're cycling through your party, you'll have to shave off a few seconds. This was especially relevant to the pool of playable Dendro units at the time. DMC, Kale, and Tignati. While Aggravate only required you to apply a Dendro aura every so often, it was nowhere near long enough to last the full duration of Cyno's burst without having to switch off. Here's the catch. Similar to other characters' buffs, Cyno's is lost upon swapping out. The difference here is that Cyno's...
See, yeah, he does have a very long ult, but the thing is, though, is if you have a battery like Fischl or Kuki, you can get his ult relatively fast. It really does not affect me at all. I definitely see his points, but if you have a battery, you're going to be in his ult all of the time.
Can't see? I hear everything. Judgment is applied.
This buff is tied to his elemental bursts, and elemental bursts not only have longer cooldowns but an energy requirement to be used. In the past, I mentioned how Koching's paltry 5-second Electro Infusion was a key factor in why no one used her pre-Dendro, since even though her Stellar Restoration cooldown was only 7.5, it was just too short to really get any meaningful field time. However, in this context, it tends to work to her benefit, as she can get a quick barrage of Electro application, then switch back to her Dendro teammate to reapply another instance, rinse and repeat. It's the same reason why I'll hate them and Novelette are so popular. They can leave min rotation and restart it without losing too much uptime if by chance you forgot something. Cyno on the other hand has an ultimate with a cooldown of 20 seconds and a cost of 80. You can't just swap out to him and then continue where you left off. Now, it's not that having your buff ability on your elemental burst instead of skill is a bad thing per se, but it does heavily narrow down the pool of units that can work with them since it implies a tighter margin for error. If you mess up on a character with a skill-based buff, you probably only have to wait like 3 or 4 seconds and then get back on track. But if you mess up on Cyno, you have to either commit to it and just attack with suboptimal damage, or switch out and have to wait however much time before the ultimate comes off cooldown, as well as having to recharge. As a non-field hyper carry whose damage is closely tied to elemental reactions, Cyno has many boxes you have to check off, particularly because he's ultimate dependent, not skill dependent. He needs 12 seconds to do that for as long as he can, if not a bit longer, to account for the aforementioned time it takes to rotate through your party. And then, considering you're staying on one person for a long time, thus making you more vulnerable to damage in light of not abusing quick swap burst invincibility spam, you need a form of protection. Said protection also has to maintain itself long enough to at least cover Cyno for the majority of his rotation. Though he does gain interruption resistance on his burst, it's not sufficient enough to protect him from any heavy attacks. In other words, you need a shielder since having to dodge eats up precious uptime. Cyno also needs energy. Like Shell, virtually all of Cyno's pressure is housed in his burst. Unless you can clear whatever it is you're trying to kill within one activation of his burst, you'll need to get it back up again, although in his defense you can remedy that with Thunder and Fury. Finally, he needs a lot of stats, with his main combat focus being placed on Dendro reactions on top of his burst and Day 4 passive directly correlating to Elemental Mastery. Cyno can draw power from more than just attack and crit stats, giving him a fairly high investment ceiling. In the present day, most if not all of these requirements can be met, but it wasn't always like that. When Cyno first came out, the number of units that worked with him were few and far between, if not outright zero. Because swapping out—
Yeah, that's the thing too, is we are getting a lot of characters that are now working really well with Cyno, so we aren't stuck in that, you know, that Cyno, Fischl or Kuki, Nahida, Zhongling, like kind of a deal in order to get the most out of him. Now we really have the opportunity to play around with Cyno, like I did with Chevrus and the Overload, which was a super fun team to play. And now I'm using Cyno, Tighnari, Baizhu, and Fischl. I know it's not meta, but it does the job. And I think that is the key. I'm not looking for maximum damage, maximum crit rate. I just want the damage to feel like, okay, I can go in, defeat things, and not have to worry too much about it. I'm not looking to one-shot things. So I'm not looking for a meta team. So I can see when Cyno first came out, the difficulty of building a party around him could have been frustrating. But now we have the opportunity with so many different characters and so many different kind of party builds that work with Cyno that makes him a lot of fun. I love using Cyno.
Now turned off his elemental burst. Once you took the field with Cyno, you were stuck on him, so you had to make sure everything was set up to make the most of it. There's no stopping to refuel midway through. Thing is, no one could last long enough to match his 18-second duration, so players were disappointed by his damage being perfectly average if not somewhat underwhelming. Like I said, on release in 3.1, the only Dendro character who could apply Dendro off-field for long enough was DMC, and even then they could only sustain 2/3 of the time Cyno could. Electro-wise, Fischl technically had uptime that exceeded even Cyno's, totaling at 24 seconds, but under the condition that you activate her burst after Oz disappears from his skill or vice versa, and as we've established, Cyno doesn't allow you to do that during his burst. Other offfielders like Shinobu and Beidou either had not enough duration, didn't supply enough battery, or had something that made them awkward to use with Cyno. If attempting to run a Hyper Bloom team, Hydro options that lasted that long were also hard to come by, or they were being used by other teams. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Cyno practically had no team when he came out. Players were using suboptimal placeholders for the time being, making him look a lot weaker than everyone initially anticipated. Suffice to say, the community expected a lot from him, and with those expectations not having been met, it left a sour impression on everyone's mind, subsequently resulting in the controversial discourse on whether people are saying Cyno is good or trash, or why they regret pulling for him, all that stuff. Moreover, Cyno also didn't really have good free-to-play equipment. For one, his signature weapon was really the only option for him, as no alternative
I still have to get his weapon.
As many necessary stats as Staff of Scarlet Sands. I believe the best free-to-play option prior to the new version 4 Battle Pass weapons was White Tassel, so people who tried playing him C0R0 were even more disappointed by the extent of his damage, or should I say lack thereof. It wouldn't be until the version after when Cyno got his first proper teammate, Nahida, a character who very easily can meet the requirements for a long-lasting Dendro aura. All schemes to know has a mark duration of 25 seconds, covering Cyno's entire buff duration with time to spare. Whether he wants to do Hyper Bloom or Quicken, Nahida can handle both, so at the very least, the Dendro side of things was taken care of. However, it should be noted that Nahida's mark duration is on a target-by-target basis, so while she has a 5 or 6 second cooldown to easily reapply her mark onto new enemies that spawn, you cannot do that during Cyno's burst, making him a liability in multi-wave or AoE scenarios. Overall though, she was the best you could get for Dendro, but that's only one unit who can fully hold him down. The next optimal teammate to come up for him wouldn't be until 3.6 when Baiju came out, but Baiju's true value would not be realized until 4.2 when Furina came out. So essentially, for the entirety of version 3, Cyno basically had no team, at which point players were disappointed to see how poorly he was performing when version 3 was the year where Genshin was showcasing the power of touching grass. Alhaitham, Milu, Nahida, so many powerful meta-defining units that came out, and likewise a huge variety of Dendro teams. This was Electro's big break. Yaemiko, Shogun, Fischl, Shinobu, Keqing, Beidou, even Lisa to an extent. The Electro roster at large experienced a renaissance. At the same time, Cyno was sitting here waiting for a proper team and looking like Squidward staring out the window at SpongeBob and Patrick. Fast forward to version 4 and he finally achieved a well-rounded team. With Nahida, Cyno has all the off-field Dendro application he cares to have. Furina provides him with a massive boost in DPS that can last through the entirety of his rotation, while at the same time offering off-field Hydro application that also stays on field for the entirety of his rotation, not to mention Furina's skill damage being incredible in its own right. Lastly, of course, Furina needs a healer, and it would also be nice to give Cyno a shield so he doesn't have to worry about dodging. That would be Baiju. To be fair, Baiju's ultimate has a duration of only 14 seconds, but functionally you're mostly concerned about using him to max out Furina's fanfare and buff up Cyno himself, since Baiju's A4 passive augments Dendro reactions of all types. It took literally over a year for Cyno to finally have a strong team, and to his credit, it's a very solid team, but by that point, everyone more or less moved on from the guy already. Remember, if you were aiming for a Dendro-focused team, you had so many other characters and teams to work with. In the Dendro department, Alhaitham's team with Xingqiu, Nahida, and Shinobu accomplished almost the same exact end goal as Cyno, but with a more lenient margin for error and not requiring a team of all 5 stars. Within the Electro department even back then, the element was more suited for off-field application, not on-field driving, so most usage of Electro for Dendro took the form of the aforementioned Fischl, Shogun, Miko, Shinobu, etc. By version 4, most people already had their established Dendro teams and were working on other stuff. Throughout the entire span of Fontaine, the focus was all about off-meta, hypercarries, and niches. The funny thing is, Cyno received a rerun banner in the same version Furina came out, and while yes, she's without a doubt one of his best teammates right now, to repeat myself in almost every video mentioning her, Furina is so obnoxiously overpowered that she became one of the best supports for a lot of units, not just Cyno. People were more enthusiastic about using her for their new shiny Novelette, or to try out with some of the other characters like Hu Tao, or the half-dozen Noelle mains who have been on fatal doses of copium since day 1. One more thing I think is worth mentioning, with Furina in particular, is that she's good for Cyno, but Jean is not, forcing you to run Baiju if you want to get the most value out of her in a Cyno team. However, if you guys remember, not many people have Baiju. When he came out in 3.6, no one was playing during that time, let's be real. And it was also kind of unlucky timing since Yao Yao came out the version prior. He actually came out again in 4.2 right alongside Cyno, but let's be real, no one pulled on either banner. Recently in 4.6, Baiju came out again, but this was just after
Whoa!
Makino came out, and every free-to-play player had post-Harbinger clarity, so no one was pulling for him at that point too. Don't get me wrong, Baiju's a fantastic unit, one of the best in the game, but he might possibly be the most skippable top tier in Genshin's history, especially if you have Jin and or Xinyu. So expectedly, most people don't have him unless they were explicitly getting him for just Cyno. As the final nail in the coffin, Clarence
You're calling me out like that! I pulled for Cyno, and I pulled for Baiju.
is in the exact same niche as Cyno and coaching, and on top of her DPS and stuff being way more.
And that is why I actually liked Clarand and was thinking about pulling for her, because she did have that, she really does have that kind of combat style that Cyno has, that aggressive, I want to be in your face kind of deal, and I love it. I love that kind of play style.
More consistent than either of them. What really puts her in a better spot is that she has way more quality of life perks, not the least of which being her self-heal, letting her use Farina without having to waste a party slot on a healer. So instead of Baichu, she can bring in Fischl and give herself plenty more DPS. All in all, Cyno came in at a bad time, no teammates, poor weapon selection and such. And every single time those deficiencies were addressed, something else took place simultaneously that stole the spotlight away from him. Nahida being used in countless other teams, Farina being used in countless other teams, and then Clarence walking in straight up power and feature creeping the Electro on-fielder role. Cyno never had a chance to show what he was really made of because every time he was given a chance, someone else took it first. He's always been a good character in concept, and after all this time he's finally become good in practice, but if there's anyone who embodies the notion of good but there are better options out there, it would be him. Cyno has respectable theoretical value, but due to circumstance, he has no practical value. The roles he's aiming to fulfill are among the most saturated and competitive in the game, so it will take a miracle for him to make a resurgence. Before Clarent, he was already low-key retroactively power-crept by coaching, but after Clarent came out, it was GG for him. What do you guys think though? Do you agree with the points I made, or do you think Cyno still has a shot? You're welcome to share in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Okay, so what Vars is saying is that since his release, he hasn't really had that meta team that does significant damage, high top tier damage until now, and it is still not the highest that you could find using other characters, which I could agree with. Okay, numbers don't lie. That is the facts. Cyno isn't the strongest character out there. But here is the issue with all of this that I think a lot of people do miss, is that a lot of players don't play Genshin for meta. Not once have I looked at a character and was like, man, they are going to do a ton of damage. That is not the kind of player I am, and I know that I'm not the only one. So going in and saying that nobody plays Cyno because he isn't the highest meta tier character, I don't fully agree with. I think Genshin Impact players choose characters that they like or they can connect with. There is something about characters that pull us in. It isn't damage. For example, we are going into Natlin and everybody is saying that they want to pull for the captain, right? Yes, he is a harbinger, but everybody is saying that they want to pull for him, and we don't know his playstyle. We don't know his damage. So the point that I am trying to make is that there are other reasons why people pull for characters. Maybe not a lot of people connect with Cyno. And going with the connecting to characters and liking them to the point of where you want to pull, what I am curious about is now that Cyno's second story quest has happened, I wonder how many people are going to pull for Cyno now. That is something that I am curious about, because now that he has more screen time, we have learned a little bit more about him as a character. Is there more of a connection to where people want to use Cyno? I don't think it just comes down to combat and damage overall. But those are my thoughts and my points on why it might not be just damage output. But that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Vars did a great job making this video and made some great points. And I hope I made some great points as well. You know, as a Cyno main, I have to defend my boy. You know, I gotta defend him. He's my boy. I love Cyno. But that is it for today's video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you pull for characters specifically for damage, or is it more about connection with a character that makes you want to pull for them and main them? I would be very interested to know your thoughts. But again, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you beautiful tadpoles in the next video. Bye!